Yes!
I'm not sure how many of y'all can relate, but the grass type is one of my all-time favorites. This is mostly because of the fact that Bulbasaur was my first starter Pokemon back when I got Red version back in Christmas of '99. Man, those are some good times. But yeah, Blaziken is my favorite Pokemon of all time, but Bulbasaur is in a league of his own. And being my first Pokemon, I don't really feel right comparing them to Blaziken. So I guess it's safe to say that I love both of them equally, just in different ways. But anyways, I wanted to talk about the grass type because it always seemed like that it's one of the least powerful types in the franchise, and I think it would be pretty cool to talk about what could be done to make the grass type better. So, with all of that out of the way, let's go ahead and get it in. Okay, so first off, one of the most common complaints about the grass type is that it's weak against 5 types, consisting of fire, ice, poison, flying, and bug. Grass is tied with the rock type for the most weaknesses, and both of these types are the only ones in the entire franchise that have more than 4 weaknesses. Ice is the only type that has 4 weaknesses, meaning that the other 15 types have 3 or less weaknesses. Grass is also tied with the bug type to be the most resisted type as well, with both of these types being resisted by 7 others. Okay, so we're just a couple of minutes into the video and things aren't sounding too good about the grass type. So what's actually good about it? Well, when it comes to the resistances, grass resists itself, water, ground, and electricity, and is strong against ground, water, and rock. Okay, so things are beginning to sound a little bit better. Now, grass being strong against water is nothing short of amazing because there are more water Pokemon than anything else in the entire franchise, and water's only other weakness is electricity, which grass is resistant to. Being strong against ground is just as great because ground is one of the most powerful offensive types, being strong against 5 other types itself. Earthquake, for example, is one of the most powerful attacks in the games, boasting a power of 100, hits for physical damage, and can hit all grounded targets, even allies in multi-battles, and has 100% accuracy. But due to the fact that it's a ground type attack, it doesn't hit grass types nearly as hard. Once again, due to the fact that grass types resist ground type damage. This probably isn't as applicable in the present day, but the grass type was crazy good in Gen 1 due to its facile ability to counter rock types. In the Kanto games, Brock is the first gym leader, and I quickly realized that picking Bulbasaur in the Gen 1 games was an amazing decision because of how much easier he is to defeat. But I definitely remember Brock being a problem in Yellow version since Pikachu was the starter Pokemon in that game. And if you pick Charmander in Red or Blue, since fire is weak against rock and ground, the types that make up Brock's entire team. But yeah, over the years I've noticed that the grass type has received the obvious short end of the stick in every conceivable aspect. For the most part, the grass type starter is usually the least favorite of the 3, Chikorita being arguably the most disliked grass type starter of all time. And being weak against 5 types and strong against 3 has a lot of people completely ignoring the grass type as a whole. Of course, the shortcomings of the grass type weren't as evident in Gen 1 because for the exception of Tangela, all grass type Pokemon during that time period were dual type, and grass was most commonly paired with poison. And in my opinion, the poison type complements the grass type amazingly. Poison resists grass's weakness to bug in the present day, but back in Gen 1, poison was actually weak against bug, rendering the grass poison combo quad weak to bug back in Gen 1. But grass resists poison's weakness to ground, leaving this type combo weak to ice, psychic, flying, fire, and a quad weakness to bug. This means that back in Gen 1, grass poison had the same amount of weaknesses as a pure grass type. However, everything about the bug type was terrible back in Gen 1, especially when it comes to its poor selection of damage dealing moves. So it was pretty safe to write off bug type damage as an effective method of dealing with the grass poison types back then. I'll explain why later on. Now it might surprise you if I told you that Execute and Executor's grass psychic typing was just as viable, if not better than the grass poison combo in Gen 1, and I'll explain how. So in the present day, grass and psychic is one of the worst pairings because it has 7 weaknesses consisting of ice, dark, flying, poison, fire, ghost, and a quad weakness to bug. And 7 is the most amount of weaknesses one Pokemon can have. But you gotta realize that back in Gen 1, there was a bug in the code that made psychic Pokemon immune to ghost type attacks instead of being weak to them. And the dark type didn't exist until Gen 2, so that makes 5 weaknesses. And despite the fact that grass psychic would be quad weak against bug, there were only 3 damage dealing bug type attacks in Gen 1, consisting of Leech Life, Twin Needle, and Pin Missile. Twin Needle at the time was Beedrill's signature move, so no other Pokemon could learn it but Beedrill. Pin Missile could only be learned by Beedrill and Jolteon by level up, since it wasn't a TM back then, and Leech Life could only be learned by the evolutionary lines of Zubat and Venonat, and this attack was also not a TM back then. But none of this even matters anyways because all 3 of these attacks were laughably terrible, so it's honestly safe to say that bug it barely counted as strong against anything. This effectively made the 4 remaining weaknesses, fire, poison, flying, and ice, truly super effective against the grass psychic pairing. I'm not even going to go into detail about how overpowered the psychic type was back in Gen 1 because that's a different story for a different day. Gen 2 is when things got straightened out a bit because a lot of the type matchup inconsistencies from Gen 1 no longer existed. Poison lost its weakness to bug, making the grass poison typing weak against fire, ice, flying, and psychic like it is today. The dark type was introduced as a weakness of psychic, and the ghost type was actually strong against psychic like it should have been originally. This meant that grass psychic actually had 7 weaknesses now, meaning that Execute, Executor, and the at the time newest mythical Pokemon Celebi were the only grass Pokemon to have 7 weaknesses. Tyranitar was also introduced in this generation, and its rock dark typing also gives it 7 weaknesses, and now that we're on this subject, I'm going to share some knowledge with y'all. So we established that the most amount of weaknesses one Pokemon can have is 7, and there's only 6 type pairings in the entire franchise where this is possible. Grass Ice, Grass Dark, Grass Psychic that we already discussed, Rock Dark, and Rock Fighting. Rock Psychic is technically the 6th, but the only Rock Psychic Pokemon we have right now is Solrock and Lunatone, and their Levitate ability makes them immune against ground type attacks. Of course, if their abilities are negated and or if we end up getting more Rock Psychic types later on down the line that do not have the Levitate ability, Rock Psychic would become a true member of the 7 Weaknesses Club. It's not a club I would ever want to be a member of, but I digress. Again, Rock Dark also has 7 weaknesses, but at the time this video is recording, Tyranitar is the only Rock Dark type. Terrakion's unique Rock Fighting typing also renders it weak against 7 other types as well, but once again, this typing only belongs to Terrakion as of presently. Grass Dark Pokemon are weak against Fighting, Flying, Poison, Fire, Ice, and a quad weakness to Bug. Fairy became the 7th weakness to this type combo when it made its debut in Gen 6, meaning that Grass Dark has 6 weaknesses for 3 generations. This is because this type pairing didn't come into play until Gen 3, belonging to Nuzleaf, Shiftry, and Cacturne. Zarude was added in Gen 8, but unfortunately he didn't exist during the 3 generation long stretch when Grass Dark wasn't weak against Fairy yet. Grass Ice is the unique typing of Snover and Abomasnow, but it's weak to Flying, Fighting, Poison, Rock, Bug, Steel, and a quad weakness to Fire. You know, this really sucks because it's already bad enough that Grass Ice, Grass Psychic, and Grass Dark all have 7 weaknesses, but all 3 of these type pairings have a quad weakness on top of that. The Rock type may be tied with Grass for the most weaknesses at 5, when not paired with anything else, but only one of its 3 type pairings that can have 7 weaknesses has a quad weakness, that being Rock Dark's quad weakness to Fighting, which once again has little to no relevancy because Tyranitar is the only one. You know, when you factor all of this in, it becomes incredibly apparent why the grass type is made fun of so much, but there are some redeeming qualities about the grass type, and even though there aren't many examples of such, they still count nonetheless. What if I told you that there were 5 other types that can be comboed with grass aside from poison to create a type pairing with 4 or less weaknesses? Let's see what they are. Okay, so first off, we got Grass and Steel, which is weak against Fighting and quad weak against Fire. But this typing only belongs to Pharisee's evolutionary line in Kartana. Grass Water is weak against Flying, Bug, and Poison, but this type pairing is unique to Lotad's evolutionary line. Grass Ground is weak against Flying, Bug, Fire, and a quad weakness to Ice, but Torterra is currently the only Grass Ground type in the entire franchise. And the most shocking pairing of all of these would have to be Rock Grass, and the weaknesses of this typing consist of Fighting, Bug, Steel, and Ice. I find it to be hilarious that the 2 types with more weaknesses than anything else are able to combine together and only be weak against 4 other things, but unfortunately only Lileep's evolutionary line has this typing. Before I mention the final entry, I want to say that as a huge fan of the Bulbasaur evolutionary line, I almost lost my mind when I found out that Mega Venusaur's ability was Thick Fat when X and Y first came out. For those of y'all that aren't aware, a Pokemon with Thick Fat takes only half damage from fire and ice attacks, so in Mega Venusaur's case, it loses its weaknesses to Ice and Fire, leaving only Psychic and Flying as its only weaknesses. You know, I gotta tip my hat to Game Freak for doing this because Mega Venusaur received more benefit from this ability than any other Pokemon that can learn it. 2 generations later, Thick Fat was given to Appleton as a hidden ability, which was great because being a Grass Dragon type, Appleton is 4 times weak to Ice, but with Thick Fat it only becomes double weak to it. But again, no other Pokemon benefit from this ability more than Mega Venusaur. This is why I'm hoping that Mega Evolution returns in the future and becomes a mainstay because I would love to use Mega Venusaur in the present day. Oh yeah, and since I got horribly sidetracked, I wanted to mention that Grass Electric is weak against Poison, Bug, Fire, and Ice, but this typing belongs exclusively to Mo Rotom. But wait, we're not done yet. There is a 6 type combo that I want to mention, and I'm aware that this typing doesn't exist yet, but if it did, it would be ridiculously amazing. The fire half of this typing would negate 3 out of 5 of the weaknesses of his grass half, and the grass half would negate 2 out of 3 of fire's weaknesses, leaving this type combo weak to only rock, poison, and flying. That leaves only 1 of fire's weaknesses and 2 of grass's weaknesses. Unfortunately, a Pokemon with the grass fire typing will be difficult to justify using because grass and fire are 2 of the starter Pokemon types. So those of y'all that are super fixated on every one of your party Pokemon having different types, this is probably something you might end up avoiding. But my biggest fear is that Nintendo Game Freak will introduce the grass fire typing on a regional variant or an alternate form of a pre-existing Pokemon instead of a brand new Pokemon, because there are countless examples of such, including but not limited to Rotom's forms, Galarian Weezing, and Alolan Sandslash. So I really hope that when the grass fire type becomes a thing, it's given to a legendary Pokemon or a 3-stage evolutionary line. The most common depictions of what a grass fire type would look like consists of many things, but the most common ones being Pokemon based on jalapenos and the burning bush from the Bible. So what exactly could be done to make the grass type better? Okay, so for starters, it's a huge problem that the grass type relies too heavily on being paired with another type to become more effective defensively. The majority of the types that could be paired with grass to make it suck less are currently only available to specific evolutionary lines, and it'll remain that way until more Pokemon with these type pairings come into existence. And I've always felt that grass's weakness to flying never fully made sense. Now I understand that there are multiple examples of type weaknesses that aren't fully logical, but figuring out why flying is strong against grass really forces you to use your imagination to figure out how it could possibly make sense. It's mostly agreed upon that flying is strong against grass because birds eat seeds and grass, and they make their nests with tree twigs and grass, I guess. I've also heard that gale force winds and tornadoes are capable of uprooting trees. And even though these are all factual, using any of these real world examples to justify grass's weakness to flying is a huge reach. And if I'm being honest, I believe that Game Freak just made grass weak against flying just because. I don't understand why, because without flying, grass would still have 4 other weaknesses. So it's definitely safe to say that grass and its 5 weaknesses was one of the many rookie mistakes that Game Freak made when Pokemon was brand new, but unfortunately nothing was ever done about it. And a pointless shortcoming was retained from the earliest days of the Pokemon games, leaving us with a type that's for the most part underwhelming for absolutely no reason. However, there is a way that this can be mitigated. As of right now, flying is strong against bug, grass, and fighting, but if grass was to lose its weakness to flying, the ground type should gain a weakness to flying instead. This would be perfectly justified because, as I said earlier, ground is strong against 5 other types, but I didn't mention that ground is only weak to 3 types. If flying was strong against ground, it would go from being strong against 2 of the weakest types in the games to being strong against 2 of the strongest types in the games, and completely resistant to 1 of them. Fighting and ground are the only types that are strong against 5 other types, and I guarantee that if flying damage was strong against ground and immune to it at the same time, the usage of flying Pokemon would skyrocket. I mean, there's a ton of amazing flying types that are popular already, but just imagine if this was actually a thing. But how could flying be justified as a weakness to ground? Simple. For the same reason it's strong against fighting. Flying is strong against fighting because in a fight, someone or something with an aerial advantage has a huge leg up on their opponent. This applies just as much, if not more, to the ground type, especially when you realize that flying is completely immune to ground type damage. Also, wind blows away dirt and sand with ease, and in the Pokemon world, anything related to air, wind, or flight is always grouped into the flying type. And despite the fact that I'm fully aware that this might not ever happen, I can assure you that it would make a lot more sense than flying being strong against grass for a reason that isn't apparent or obvious in the slightest. Like I said before, I really like the grass type as a whole, and I hope that something is done for it in the future to make it better than what it currently is. There have been so many changes in the games over the years when it comes to certain types losing resistances, gaining weaknesses, losing weaknesses, and other things, so there's still some hope for the grass type, but only time will tell. Well everybody, that does it for this one. I really hope that you enjoyed the video. In the comment section, tell me how you feel about the grass type, and if you feel that it's deserving of some love. And if you made it to the end of this video and enjoyed what you watched, do me a favor and thumb press to that like button until it turns blue. And if you're new to my neck of the woods, go ahead and subscribe to the channel and click that bell icon so you don't ever miss a video of the most elite gaming content. But with that being stated, 1LHD is over and out. Y'all take it easy.